I'm Frank Corey with the Whatcom Conservation District. I've worked with mostly the drainage improvement districts and some private landowners over the last 10 years or so on drainage maintenance projects all over the ag part of the county here. And also through the district, I've worked on a lot of stream buffer projects, primarily with funding through Whatcom County Public Works using the Sheriff's Office corrections crews. So we'll just get into it. I'm going to talk about stream buffers, drainage maintenance. Just some facts to begin with is that the assumptions I make is that drainage is essential, it's needed for viable agriculture here in Whatcom County, and that it's also a fairly expensive proposition, particularly if you're talking about maintaining and drainage in fish-bearing streams. Unlike Skagit County, most of our ag streams here also have fish in them. Doesn't mean we don't have some constructed ditches within a field that don't have fish. Those are a little easier to maintain. But the main channels, particularly the main ones that drainage improvement districts maintain, Scott Ditch, I see the blocks here, Cam Creek, some of the other channels like 10 Mile Creek, all of those are full of fish. Doing anything in those channels is difficult permit-wise, and it's also very expensive. Oftentimes you have to totally de-water the channel, take the fish out, you can't let muddy water go downstream, you have to mitigate for those impacts by planting buffers or some other means. So it's not a simple thing. When I talk about drainage, I mean the fact, there's two things. There's drainage maintenance and drainage in general. And by drainage I mean the fact that we've totally altered the landscape of western Whatcom County way back when in our grandfather's times. Drain the wetlands, turn them into what now are drainage channels. Those have negative impacts. They've increased flooding, they've reduced summer flows for fish, they've had long-term impacts to fish populations. Drainage maintenance, which is a short-term thing, also has negative impacts. The excavator goes in. These days we use excavators. They used to use hand tools and horses. The fish are dredged out. The fish habitat is dredged out. The shade over the stream is removed, and all the muddy water goes downstream. So those are the things. We need drainage, but it has negative impacts, so how do we balance this? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, why do we need to maintain drainage? It's two primary reasons. There's lots of other reasons. One is that dirt gets in the stream. Field sediments are the primary cause of this. Sometimes the stream will erode a bank, sometimes a road runoff, development, whatever. Sediments enter the stream, builds up, primarily because of this reed canarygrass, which is mostly an introduced species from 100 years ago, but it traps the sediments. It grows and dies over the years and builds up an organic layer. Everything is working against us in terms of maintaining drainage. So we talk about, can't we just set back from the stream a little ways and let the natural processes work? That's what some of the stakeholders would like. And in some cases that's probably true. In the Midwest they use a lot of these big huge filter strips along their streams. Again, not just a field ditch, but the more important ones. And these filter strips can be like 60 to, in some cases, several hundred feet wide. Very effective to keep the field sediments out of the stream, no doubt about it. Doesn't do anything to shade the stream. So it addresses the water pollution issue of sediment. It doesn't address temperature, but very effective for sediment. We also talked about planting big buffers. This is a CRET buffer that was just planted, and that might work in some situations. Again, it'll prevent sediment from going down in there for the most part. Eventually we'll have lots of shade over the stream. The grass will disappear for the most part, and we'll have good shade, lower temperatures. But we're losing farmland with both these things. And the question is, can we afford to do that in every situation? No. In some situations, in high priority areas, probably yes. But what tends to happen in both of these, for various reasons, is that the water level will creep up over the years. In the case of big grass filter strips, it's probably the grass in the channel that does it more than anything. In the case of the big riparian buffers, it could be anything. It could be a tree falling in and trapping sediment and grass that's coming down from upstream, other branches and things. But over the years, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you tend to see the water level coming up. And that's okay if it comes up within the buffer area. But here in Whatcom County, we also have drain tiles. Here's a picture of one right here. And my grandfather putting them in. No, it's really not, but somebody's grandfather. It was a lot of work. And so say we do something to this stream, and over the time, water level comes up a foot or so, then we're not just impacting the area buffer that was done, but we might be impacting 1,000 or 2,000 feet upstream, up the field from wherever those drain tiles were put in. So we need to be careful, we need to be sensitive to all these things, because as well as having good fish habitat, good clean water and everything, we also want to be able to eat. So, why do we care? By we, I mean the greater community. We have the ag community represented here. I see a few agency folks here. We have stakeholders that care about a lot of other things as well. So again, we're talking about two things. We're talking about drainage, the long-term impacts of that, and drainage maintenance impacts, the shorter-term impacts of that. And it kind of gets, the reasons are the same as why we want clean water, why we want to keep fecal matter out of the streams, why we want to keep the temperature low. The reasons are all the same. With drainage maintenance, this is, I don't remember where this is actually, but this was just dredged out of the stream, big old muddy stuff here. There's huge impacts when that happens. I mean, we tried to exclude the fish, but we were still scooping out fish with the excavator and trying to rescue them. Dale got into that a little bit. It's kind of fun. I almost used a picture of you, but I didn't. And it's expensive again. And there's fish everywhere. Both of these actions have long-term impacts to fish. A lot of the stakeholders in the community care a lot about fish. And we want clean water because kids play in it. This is the Million Smiles playground in Linden. If somebody's upstream from here dredging out a channel, there's sulfur and all this stuff that's being released. It's going right down through there. And that's just not, it's not okay. You got to be careful with that. The fish, it takes years to establish a habitat in a stream or a ditch or whatever. And you dredge it out every 5 or 10 years. You're losing so much because it takes another 5 or 10 years for that habitat to redevelop in there, and then you do it again. So it's this repeated cycles that definitely is part of the reason why. It's not the only reason by any stretch of the imagination. It has to do with why fish are in trouble. Come on. And finally, more and more in this county and elsewhere, we're irrigating vegetable farms out of these same stream channels. And the water has to be clean for that. It can't be polluted with anything. This is an exaggeration here that the kids are playing in the irrigation water, but it's kind of a cool picture. So, and finally, shellfish downstreams, the tribal ones in Portage Bay and the commercial ones in Drayton Harbor, they need clean water as well, although this does not look like fun to me at all. These guys are out collecting oysters, and I just can't see that. But we need to be sensitive to their needs. So to understand what we can do to maintain channels and what options there are, I think it's useful to talk about what stream channels look like now and what they did before we started altering them just a little bit. So I'm going to show you some pictures of what streams look like now, and I promised myself I would say positive things about each one of these. So this one, these are actually hand-placed rocks because they're all fit together like a rock wall. So somebody really had some fun doing that. And this one, I guarantee you, this outside bend is not going to erode one little bit. That's an awesome stream channel. This one up here, if you were to maintain drainage in that, you got great access. You got a paved road right there to work off of. You don't have to worry about grass being in your way because they've knocked this bank down. And this one here, I'm really impressed that they rip-wrapped this outer bend here so that the bricks wouldn't erode. I think that was brilliant, brilliant. So I'm just going to go back one. This is what people think of as a normal, healthy stream these days. I think if people in Seattle, Bellingham, more urban areas were asked to draw a picture of a stream, this is what they would draw, because this is what we see in parks. This is not what streams in western Whatcom County looked like prior to alteration. These are more ag areas here. This one, it's easy to see fish in there if somebody's looking. Again, I'm being positive here. And this one is a real reach, but I think this corn is close enough that the stream is probably shaded a little bit in the hottest part of the summer. That's pretty cool. These are what streams look like now. This is not what they looked like originally. The premise is that streams, ditches, they're going to want to revert to their natural state, so that's what we're either going to support or we're going to fight against by maintaining the drainage. This is probably more what streams in western Whatcom County, all of western Washington, looked like prior to alteration. There were huge areas of open water, swamps, marshes, wetlands, whatever you want to call them. You probably couldn't discern the flow in many places. You look at maps of north of Linden, it was all this big marshy area that the surveyors couldn't get through. You could see remnant areas where you could see Fish Trap Creek, but much of it was just an unmapped channel. This is probably what much of Whatcom County looked like. As you go up in the hills a little bit, you get a little bit more stream gradient. You probably started to see flowing water a little bit more, lots of wood in the stream, lots of big meanders in the stream, things that we think of if we go hiking up in the mountains, probably a little bit more natural. This was a huge part of Whatcom County, the entire nation for that matter, beaver dams. I read a research paper when I was doing this, that 82% of stream reaches with low gradient had beaver dams. The stream reaches were pretty small, so in every stream I think in western Whatcom County is way below 3%. So everything had beaver dams in it. Historically, the thing with beavers is they were trapped out starting in the 1700s. The earliest U.S. geological surveys were done in the late 1800s. So we don't really know how many beavers there were originally. When they did those surveys, they estimated that there were millions of beavers left in Washington State, despite the fact that the Hudson's Bay Company and everything, all the other fur trappers had already abandoned the area because they had trapped out most of the beavers, but there were still that many more. So they were everywhere. There were beaver ponds everywhere. The first pictures I showed you here, this is undoubtedly beaver influenced. It was everywhere. By the early 1900s, beavers had once again largely been trapped out. And then population started coming back. And then two things happened right around 2000, the year 2000, is the people of the state passed an initiative banning lethal traps, leg hold traps for beavers and other fur-bearing animals. You could only use live traps. And at the same time, pelt prices for beavers dropped from like $50 an animal to less than $5 an animal. So whereas before that, the State Department of Fish and Wildlife said there were, I don't remember what, 20,000 a year being legally taken for either nuisance trapping or sport trapping to sell the pelts, dropped to virtually zero. And right after that, the latest data is that they went from 8,000 a year to 2,000 a year. This is just the nuisance trapping. It doesn't cover the sport trappers, which I spent a lot of my childhood down in the lower Skagit. And the kids I played with all did sport trapping and sold beaver pelts. And they did it to make money. And at $5 an animal, you're not making money. But at $50, it was good money back then. So I think the best data we have is that's a pretty significant number. So since 2000, what do you think is happening with beaver populations? It's going up. It's really going up. Some of the diking districts here in the county 10 years ago would trap 5 or 10 beavers. Now they're trapping 40 or 50 a year. I've been hanging out at Hovander Park for the last 20 years or so. 10 years ago, before these changes started taking place, you would sit on the riverbank down there hoping to see a beaver swim by. I went down there last summer. It was like a beaver freeway. It's amazing. They were just swimming everywhere. And it never used to be like that. And things are changing. The beavers are coming back. We have to keep that in mind. We'll talk again towards the end of this talk. So, let's get back to drainage. Streams want to become natural again. This is a field, a ditch that's got water in it right before the planting season. You can see the trees starting to green up back here. We have to get on this field and plant it, right? But the streams don't want that. They want to keep filling in. We're exasperating it with some farming practices that might put some sediments in. We're exasperating it because we brought in the reed canarygrass. But they want to go back to what they were, and beavers are a part of that. But it's just what the stream wants to do as well. So again, there might be places, but it's okay for that to happen. But this is sort of the key thing, and I think it's why you guys are here, is because other places we want to keep them drained and keep growing food on them. And we need to figure out how to do that. So what options are there? You guys are quiet. I'm going to be done here in like 10 minutes. And we're going to do nothing but eat pizza. So. Herbicides. You can legally, with a permit, apply aquatic herbicides to an irrigation channel, or in our case is a drainage channel, to control noxious weeds. Reed canarygrass is a noxious weed. Other vegetation, native vegetation, are not noxious weeds. You can't use it on those. And the hedgerows, which are the compromise that we've come to with this county program that I used to work with, still work with a little bit, which is we don't want to plant big wide buffers taking up a bunch of farmland. We want to plant a narrow, reasonable buffer that's enough to shade out the reed canarygrass, open up the stream channel again, and maybe buffer the farmland just a little bit. So I'm going to talk about both of these, and as you probably guessed, I'm going to talk more about this one. This is actually a picture of California Creek Drainage Improvement District number 7. They've been applying herbicides to this stream channel for 5, 6, 7 years now. Drainage-wise, it's amazing. It's awesome. It's really opened it up. And water quality-wise, it's really awful. It's really opened it up. The sun is heating on it now. The water temperatures are a lot higher. The fish that actually like the grass in the channel, they hide under it and take shelter from it. They've got nothing now. Go back. There's just no place for a fish to be in here. Blue herons like it a lot because they can catch those fish. But see, I'm being positive. This is a flow chart that the Department of Ecology made. Anybody ever seen a Department of Ecology flow chart? This is classic, right? Telling you which aquatics herbicide permit you can use for different things. I don't expect you to read it. I made it down to about here yesterday when I was putting this together. But you can do it. Most of the drainage improvement districts have this permit. So some districts, like the one, DID 31 up in Sumas area, they spend about $10,000 a year spraying their stream channels. Scott Ditch spends, Dale, how much do you guys spend, do you know?
This year it's like 2,000.
Yeah, it works pretty good.
My question on that is, at the last meeting I heard, we're going to start to cut down on that. Is that true?
Unknown.
A group, it's not an organized thing yet, I guess, but
Yep.
that's what we were told.
Ecology and the State Department of Agriculture handle this permit under the federal NPDES. What does that stand for, Nicole? National Pollution Discharge Elimination
System.
It's this big, broad permit that lets you pollute. And when you're spraying herbicides on the water, you're polluting that water with the herbicide. The herbicides that are legal to use are ones that don't have much in the way of negative effects. That's why you can use them in the water. So the permit that ecology, it goes back and forth. One year it's agriculture giving you the permit, the next year it's ecology giving you the permit. I don't know which one it is right now. It's an online application, it's free. It's the easiest permit in the world to get for this sort of thing. And when it was reauthorized in 2012, I think, and they have to go through a public process for something like that. And a number of stakeholder groups, including the Swinomish tribe, I think, said, no, you can't be doing this. It does this to stream channels. That's not okay. There's fish in there. The permit was authorized anyway. I think it goes through next year, at which time it comes up for reauthorization. And there's been talk from a couple of environmental groups that I've read about of a lawsuit to try to put an end to herbicide use on fish-bearing streams. So the answer to Dale's question is we don't know yet, but it would not surprise me at all if that practice is, if the end is put to that at some point. And it definitely has some impacts, both positive and negative. Positive for agriculture is it is amazingly effective at controlling drainage. But it exposes the water to the sun, it heats up, it damages fish habitat. It's an annual expense. The drainage district up in Sumas, they spend that $10,000 every summer to spray the grass. And if that's how they're going to maintain it, they're going to do that every summer forever. And it's a big geographic area. I don't know how much that is per acre, but it adds up. You know, it's something you got to keep doing. So the question is that a sustainable system ecologically for the fish, the water quality, and the expense, or is it not? Now, what I really want to talk about is hedgerows. Also coined the long skinny forest. So what we've done is planted native shrubs, not trees, things that get to be hopefully 10 or 12, maybe 15 feet tall in a narrow strip along the ditch or stream. Have some benefits on berry fields. It'd be a little bit of a spray buffer. I'd like to think that nobody's spraying manure that close and that it's a manure buffer, but I have seen that a couple times and it seems to have some effectiveness. Washington State Department of Agriculture is putting together a study right now on some of these hedgerows that we've planted in conjunction with blueberry fields, which uses a ton of pesticides, and they want to document if it's actually buffering the chemicals from reaching the water or not. And the thought is that they probably do, because how could they not? It's a pretty solid. Looking thing with native plants that benefit wildlife and harbor insects that are native that the fish want to eat. This is not native. This is the thing that drives me crazy, is how can people have this kind of time? I just cannot. But hedgerows have been, that was in England. In Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years, dating back to Roman times, they used them to differentiate property lines along ditches. And they actually became an art. People made their living by creating hedgerows, not just planting things, but weaving them together so that they were livestock fences and all this crazy stuff. And there's places in Europe, I don't know, anybody ever been in Europe and seen hedgerows? I've soil debris into them for so many hundreds of years that they're like 10 feet high now, and the hedge stuff is growing out of the top of that. It's just amazing to think that in France during World War II, the tanks couldn't get through the hedgerows because the rocks and field stuff had built up so much over the years that they built this special tank dozer. I used to have a picture of it that would bust through the hedgerows so that all the other tanks could go through and go kill Germans or whatever they were doing. I don't know, but pretty amazing. In the United States, hedgerows, after the Dust Bowl in the 30s, NRCS, the government, paid for planting these hedgerows anywhere and everywhere through the Midwest to control wind. Amazingly effective. A lot of those are starting to come out now that commercial agriculture there is so profitable. I hope that's not short-sighted, that we're planting cover crops or doing something to prevent that again if there's a drought. But this is pretty amazing. This is North Dakota, and they're just everywhere. These are along ditches, along field borders, just wherever they needed to break up the wind. So here we plant them along our waterways, the fish-bearing streams, and even the non-fish-bearing ditches if the landowner is willing. And they have a lot of benefits. They, like I was saying, they create that physical buffer. They create shade to control water temperature. They create shade to control reed canary grass. We'll see some pictures of that. Reed canary grass will not grow in the shade. If it's dense enough, there will not be reed canary grass in that stream anymore. It's enough of a buffer to keep sediments out and to allow any polluted water to hopefully infiltrate and clean up before it hits the groundwater or into the stream. And it'll improve fish habitat at least a little bit. It'll add some leaf litter, some small wood maybe if we allow it to stay in there. That's sort of a question. The insects that are on it will drop in and feed the fish, and it keeps the blue herons out. So Hedgerows in Whatcom County, this is the program. Andrew put this here so I don't back away from the camera, I think. And I really want to thank him for doing that. It helps me out a lot. So we planted a lot of these, mostly along fish-bearing streams. A lot of these we've planted, like on Schneider Ditch, as mitigation for drainage maintenance. The district was able to get a permit to dredge it out one time. Maybe one last time, we don't know. We're waiting to see. And then we'll plant this to prevent that from having to happen again, at least in the short run. That's been pretty successful. And we've done about 40 miles of these around the county. In some places you see them pretty noticeably, but they're small, so in a lot of places you don't really realize it's there. So this is what we all know from a producer standpoint, from an ecological standpoint, a monoculture of reed canary grass in the stream. It's hated by everybody, I think. This is Schneider Ditch over off Nolte Road, a few years back now, 2005. This was actually just dredged shortly before this. And you can see the reed canary grass is already creeping back in again, even though the water's a lot deeper. This is the hedgerow planting that we did. It's basically 3 rows, extra dense on both sides of the stream, pretty much from whatever level we figured they would grow and would be up so as not to interfere with floodwaters to the top of the bank. So this last row in places was up on the edge of the field and in places was on the bank. Wasn't much farm ground lost to this. We planted lots and lots of plants, more than you need, because we use the sheriff's office crews, and we come back and weed whack around them. And there's skilled labor, there's unskilled labor, and then there's sheriff's office crews. So you lose a few plants, and that's okay. If you plant enough, they're cheap. We put a lot of them in there. This is the 2 summers later. We had complete canopy closure over the stream. So go back one. You can see here the reed canary grass is starting to clog it up again after a year. So we spent all this money, like $3 a foot to dredge it out. There were 300 and some fish that had to be rescued out of this with buckets and people, and some of the producers helped out with that, which was really fun for them and especially for me, I think. But it's coming back, and now it's not. And you look down in there, this slide said 2010, but I think this was just a year later. There's some stinging nettles coming up here, but that reed canary grass is gone. The stream actually widened out just a little bit and deepened just a little bit once the grass was really gone. And it was totally because of the shade at this point. Pretty amazingly effective. And this continues to be, so this was planted in 2006. Nothing's been done in this reach since then. It's coming up on 9 years now. And totally maintenance free. Nobody had to spend money to spray it. Nobody's done anything to it. The hedgerow is not encroached in farmland, and it's really worked out well. From an ecological standpoint, you want diversity in something like that. So in this case, we planted all these different species, some with flowers, some with not out. And the thing that I noticed is I go out and work with the crews a lot, and out here we're in the middle of a field. There was no bird life, there was nothing like that. And now with this hedgerow there, it's just full of songbirds all the time. And songbirds don't hurt anybody, but they're pretty cool. And it's pretty gratifying to me, at least, to be out there now. And you see, you know, a woodpecker fly across the field and sit there and rest for a while, then fly on. And before this, none of that happened. And that's got to have a positive impact. Schneider Ditch over near Ferndale. This is a much wider channel. This is probably 25, 30 feet wide here. And so these are mostly willow species that were planted along it. And they're not big enough to shade it. Ecologically, what you would want is like a forest, big cottonwood trees and cedar trees and everything to totally shade it. In this case, there was an access road on one side and real valuable farmland on the other side, so nobody wanted to do that. So we planted this, not knowing how it would work as far as drainage control, but you know it's worked really well because the channel's fairly deep. And what had been happening here, and you guys probably see this, is the canarygrass comes in from the sides, and it grows and dies and builds up and grows and dies and builds up, and over the course of years, it's down in the channel even though it was a deep channel to start with. Now there's so much shade along these stream channels that that just doesn't happen anymore. So the channel has stayed deep, and again, this was done back around 2000, and nothing's been done in this reach as well once this planting became established. One more example, Elder Ditch. This was a year after that Scott Ditch one. This is off Holtz Road. If you want to go poke around one of these hedgerows, that's a pretty good place to go. This is out after it was dredged. These are some remnant trees that somebody planted from a equip contract several years ago. Nice trees, but they're not shading the stream channel at all. So, same exact thing. We planted a few rows on each side of the stream. The stream is filling up with the canarygrass the next summer already. This planting as well went to the top of the bank here. Further downstream, it was virtually a vertical bank, so the planting was definitely in the field there a little bit. And then this is what it looks like underneath there still today. It's another open stream channel. The water level is exactly what it was after it was dredged, whereas in all these others where you just dredge it, like I was saying, the water starts creeping up and up and up. It's worked out very well. I'm an advocate. This is right on the other side of Holtz Road where nothing's been done. And it's like night and day you go there because this is all getting clogged up again. It's blackberries and canarygrass, whereas right across the road there's, and it's just this beautiful open stream channel down underneath. This is an aerial photo. Silver Creek, which is also called Andreasen Ditch, down south of Smith Road, between Bellingham and Ferndale. This was planted in the mid-1990s, I think, whereas my 10-year-old daughter would say, way back in the 1900s. I can't get used to that. She says it all the time. This is what it looks like underneath there. This is basically a row or two of willows on each side of the channel. Doesn't take up a lot of field. I love how this stream meanders through the field like this. I have no idea why these aren't 90-degree angles, because they always are, right? But this one isn't. It makes no sense. And this one, since then, nothing's happened to here. It scoured down to where there's some gravel, so there's actually fish spawning there now, whereas before it was just all muck. This was not dredged first. It was just planted voluntary with the landowner. And most amazingly, the beavers have never found this spot. So it's really successful. Not much maintenance needed on these, like I've said. Sometimes they'll encroach out on the field a little bit more than somebody wants. We played around with this mower this last fall to sort of trim them down, back a little bit. And that was pretty effective. And this is actually up on Badger Road. It's a willow planting that the county did along McClellan Creek, which is a road ditch in this case. And then they come back and they keep trying to prune it into the world's longest chest freezer. It's just amazing what they do. And It's totally ineffective now because they keep pruning it so it doesn't shade the water. So don't do that. And beavers. Said we'd come back to beavers. If you build it, will they come? If you plant these hedgerows, is that somehow going to attract beavers? Scientifically, no. These guys aren't sitting here talking about, hey, Ed Block just planted some trees. Let's head over to his place. It looks like that's what they're saying, but it's not what they're saying. Beaver life cycle is they mate for life unless something happens. They live in one spot unless something happens, generally in one spot these days. They have 2 to 4 usually kits, young a year, and the kits stay in the lodge there for 2 years. And then when the new kits are born in April or May, the parents kick out the 2-year-olds. So the 2-year-olds are out on their own, and they walk or swim until they find a suitable place to stop, and hopefully a mate. So they're out walking around or swimming up a channel. You see them in May in all kinds of weird places. Out in the middle of a field, a half mile from a ditch, on the freeway, roadkill. They're just walking in a straight line until they find something. Something like 60 to 80% of them die during that journey. It's the other 20 to 40% we have to worry about. So they're walking along Scott Ditch, and they find an area there with a nice cornfield that they can make a dam out of. Dale's seen plenty of cornfield dams. They'll stop there and love it and make a home. They keep going, they find a hedgerow. They're more likely to stay there even, no doubt about it. So you got to manage that. And permit-wise, expense-wise, pulling out the occasional beaver dam is way cheaper than dredging a channel. It's way cheaper than having a flooded field. You just got to stay on top of it. The biggest complaint I've heard, which I think was from Jake DeHogue, is that the problem now with these hedgerows is you can't see the beaver dam. You have to listen for it because it's down in there. And before he could drive along in his tractor and look for a beaver dam. And I keep telling him that get off your tractor and walk. You might live longer. You know? He's not buying that, but maybe he will. But that's the thing. There's drainage problems and there's drainage problems. And most of them, I think, are probably beaver dams or old beaver dams. And these are rodents. They're North America's largest rodent, but their brains are way smaller than ours. We can outthink them. It's easy to get a permit to trap them. Oftentimes the trapper will deal with the dam. Sure, you have to get a permit from Department of Fish and Wildlife to remove a dam. On active farmland, they're more than willing to give that. Whatcom County will sign off on it as maintenance for them usually. Drainage improvement districts, most of them have long-term permits to deal with that. Just yank out those dams when they're impacting farmland and move on. You don't have to dredge out a mile of stream if there's 2 or 3 beaver dams causing the problem. Finally, just to talk about hedgerows a little bit, a couple of slides here is rural areas, urban areas, or whatever. It's the same space constraint, right? Because you have a limited amount of space, be it a person's backyard, a public park, or whatever. And you want to do something, but you don't want to do too much. Like you've got farmland with a stream on it, you want to do something, but not too much because you can't afford to get too much. So hedgerows can be used in rural and urban areas. Again, this is not it. It drives me crazy when people do things like that. Hedgerows this is in Linden, a private lot in Linden, Chuck Timblin's place. We all know Chuck. Many of us know Chuck. It's not surprising that he planted a little bit of a wildlife hedgerow. They're great for birds, different kind of wild animals in the city, little sanctuaries, and good cover, and if you have a ditch or something, good food. This is actually my house. It doesn't surprise you either that I have a hedgerow around my 1-acre lot, pretty much clear around it. And I've got some little dwarf cedar trees here and dogwoods and things. Quite a diverse. I was mowing here last summer, and some movement, and there was a big old buck deer right in the hedgerow there looking at me. that you could not see at all because it suddenly had cover, just a little bit. And this is like 5 feet wide, it's not a big deal. There's lots of probably urban and rural hedgerows in Whatcom County, but mine's the only one with a zip line going right next to it. So I'm pretty proud of that. You can see the ladder going up to it right here. That's all I got. Questions?
Frank, maybe you can talk about if folks are interested in putting in a hedgerow, what the process is there a cost share for that, etc.?
Yep, there's a couple different options. This county program that I talked about is not funded right now. We had a grant from the Department of Ecology with matching funds from Public Works, River and Flood Division. Right now, that program is not too active because we lost our ecology funding. They think we should plant huge buffers. We think we should plant hedgerows. They'll come around someday because we're right, they're wrong. I still have a sheriff's office crew with county funding. If somebody wanted to plant a hedgerow and purchase the materials, we could probably plant it for them. That's an option. NRCS EQIP program can plant hedgerows at a fairly sustainable cost share rate. And the close for EQIP, for the current sign up just closed, but there will be an opening soon. There's continuous sign ups. You can sign up for that for various farm improvements you might need, including the hedgerows. And in that case, you could plant them yourself. You could maybe work with the jail crews. You could hire a private contractor to plant them and maintain them for you. And there's also the CREP program, which now has a hedgerow practice, 15-foot hedgerow along streams under, Wayne, is it under 15 feet or under 5 feet wide? Do you remember? Anyway, smaller streams and ditches, the CREP program can do a hedgerow. And the advantage of that is it's an incentive program, so you actually get reimbursed based upon your soil type for the land taken out of production. 15 feet along the stream is probably not in production as it is, or at least most of it's not, but you still get compensated for that between like 300 and 950 an acre, depending upon where you are. And the advantage of that program is we'll come up with a private contractor of your choice. They'll come in and prep it, plant it, and maintain it for several years till the plants are up and mature and ready to go. So if you're interested in something like that, we can definitely find a way to assist and make that happen.
Right. What's your opinion of the utility of planting hedgerows on like a north-south? I'm thinking like double ditch, roadside, right along the road, north-south, really not getting a lot of shade out of it. Is that a real answer, or is it questionable?
It's unclear. And I know that's why you moved away from Double Ditch Creek, so you wouldn't have to make that decision. It's unclear, and we haven't tried it in a roadside situation like that enough at this point to really know. I've planted a few east-west facing ones on the south side, one on Scott Ditch and a couple other places, and those seem to have a huge effect. That seems to be really, really beneficial. And again, you don't lose much field. You get enough shade over there for maybe half or 3/4 of the stream, and that's been really great. And from that one side, you don't get all the benefits I was just talking about. A north-south stream with a road on one side, with the county hiring a new mower guy every couple of years. Something like Double Ditch, where you have so many fish in there and such valuable habitat. I think I would love to try it anyway, because you're going to provide some cover, you're going to control the grass on one side. I think you could do some training with the county crews to make sure they only mow the road shoulder there, so you get a little overhanging vegetation. I'm convinced, that's why we were working up there a couple of years ago, that would have some benefit. Is it going to be the complete canopy closure? No, probably not. If you're going to do that from one side, you got to plant big trees. Further up on Double Ditch, near where Henry used to be, there's some big, what were those, chestnut trees, I think, that hang out clear across, clear over the road. There's no grass under those. It's the only place on Double Ditch that's free-flowing and open because there's really good shade there. And that we know works, but we don't want to plant big, huge trees along all the farmland necessarily. So.
Is there much problem with sediment erosion? Because it fills out all the grass, which prevents sediment from making it into the stream. But what about just surface water from fields or wherever? Does that go through and fill up the streams?
Yeah, what tends to happen, tell me if I don't answer your question, is that the roots from these shrubby plants are so dense that they really hold in the soil there on the stream bank as well as the grass did. So that soil is stable. And then you might get overland flow from a field, and it's going through the grass or the open field, then it hits this root mass, which is much more porous, and most of it will infiltrate right there. Most of it does not make it to the stream at that point. The one thing I have seen over on 4 Mile, I think, where there's some flood flows, and it caught a bunch of corn debris and everything, and sort of built a little bit of a berm right there along the outside of what we're now calling a hedgerow planting. And that was so dense after a couple of years that it held the water in the field longer than we would have liked. And that was somewhat unexpected. But now that that's kind of broken down and we're not getting that, the other creek over there was cleaned out and we're not getting that overland flow, I haven't heard any complaints about that. So I think it's evened itself out. Did that answer your question, Colin?